Rovers. It is day 9 of our Atlantic crossing. We are 875 miles offshore. Now, if you're new to the channel, this is the Wave Rover story where I'm taking my 21-foot home-built sailboat across the Atlantic, starting at Virginia Beach at the mouth of Chesapeake Bay and heading across the Atlantic. Our first stop is going to be the Port of Horta in the Azores. So last night we were running parallel with the Gulf Stream, and the reason was we were waiting for this system to pass by. So at midnight I stepped out on deck briefly and it was blowing 26 knots, but I couldn't really make an assessment of what the seas were like on account of how dark it was. And then at sunrise this morning, well, I could see that the seas really weren't that bad. They're probably just a little over 2.5 meters. So about 7 or 8 feet, I would think. Anyway, as I said, we were running parallel, but this morning at about 4 o'clock, I was able to see the sea state, and then I made the determination that it was fine. We'll alter course to intercept the Gulf Stream, and we're more or less in it right now, and we're working our way more toward the center where we'll get the maximum benefit. So these waves, these seas that we're in, should probably diminish over the rest of the day. They tell me, or rather Seahawk, my meteorologist, tells me that at approximately noon to 4 o'clock this afternoon, the wind will veer. So that's approximately 10 hours from now. We'll see the wind veer to the west, and I should have a more favorable wind for this current. So that's the overall plan for today. But I mean, as it stands right now, even with these seas and this wind, which is blowing about 20 knots from the southeast, I'm getting 5 to 6 knots under reduced sail. It's time to eat. You'll never guess what we're having today. Well, the meal is almost ready. Any guesses what is on the menu today? Well, for those of you who guessed it's Wave Rover seafood omelet, well, you're correct. It's the 3-egg, 1 can of mackerel, and 1 can of sardines omelet. Well, I've had to reduce sail because the front is getting ready to pass us, but it's got a lot of energy. Come on up, let's take a look. I've reduced the sail down to just 1 panel, so we have 4 out of 5 panels reefed right now. And it's blowing somewhere between 22 and 26 knots. The seas are about 3 meters. That's to say they're about 10 feet.
I hopped on my bike with Mrs. Rover, and we had our camping gear with us, and this is on Gabriola Island on the west coast. And we rode our bikes to this wonderful provincial campground. So we arrived by bike with all of our camping gear and set up our tent on this hillside overlooking the ocean. So it was late summer. It was a sunny day, but we were on the windward side of Gabriola Island and the wind was blowing. So at a certain point, we said, right, let's get out of the wind, and we went into the tent. And that was the moment, I believe, that my wife ended up loving the idea of being off-grid. You know, that sense of being in the cocoon and being happy and secure despite being off-grid or out in the open. That's a sense of fulfillment and joy. So after we closed the fly of the tent, you know, I could look over at her face and I could see the worry disappearing. You know, that she realized that this was a safe place, that despite the wind, we were going to be totally secure. Of course we were, but that psychological step has to be enjoyed or taken by everyone to have a real happy experience.
So here's a top tip for self-steering. On the windward side of your boat, so as we can see, we're on a starboard tack, so the windward side would be the starboard side. We put this bungee cord, and this bungee cord just helps in the event that a big wave comes along and smashes the side of Wave Rover, pushing it quite a distance over, stalls out the sail, and when that happens, then the boat loses way, and we need the boat to have way for the self-steering to work. So this just brings it back before the boat loses all of its way and continues, the self-steering will continue to work. And of course, here's an example of AIS in action. So this, the motor vessel Frankopan, which is at a range of 8.5 miles, and it's on a course of 5.5. And see this little blue dot, and then the center of the range here, that's Wave Rover, and it looks like we're dancing around there. So that's our closest point of approach, and it's fairly close. It's 0.4 of a nautical mile. Now there's no way he can see me right now because he's 8 nautical miles away and the seas are really big, but we're just going to keep an eye on him and keep an eye on that course. So his course is 055. His course is 055, and we're a little too close, so hopefully but he's still an hour away. So in 30 minutes we'll check in on him again and we'll see if he's still 055 or a 056. And if in the background you hear that alarm going off, that's my VHF, which also has an AIS receiver, and it's telling me that a vessel is going to be within 2 miles of me as far as their closest point of approach. So I've got 2 alarms. So anyway, the Frankopan altered course down here says 062. If you remember, originally it was 055. So somewhere around the 5-mile mark, which is this outer ring, it altered course, and it was good enough to open the CPA to 2.1 miles. So these 2 little dots, they sort of indicate how close the boats will come at the closest point of approach. Now, the reason my dot is dancing around is because it's about 22 knots and the seas are about 3 to 4 meters. So they're pushing us around quite a bit. We're not moving quite that wildly, but the GPS just updates it so frequently. So that's what it kind of looks like here, but in reality, I'm not moving anywhere near that amount. So when we get to our closest point of approach, I'll stick my head out of the hatch and we'll just see what the tanker looks like. So the tanker is 250 meters in length, which is about 900 feet long. So it'll be a good test to see what it looks like. And the CPA should be somewhere around a mile or 1.2 miles. So we'll get an indication of what visibility would look like in fairly good visibility terms. Well, there we go. We are at CPA and the distance is 1.1 nautical miles. Now let's head up and see if we can spot it. Well, there it is right there. Yeah, she's a pretty big ship. You can see, oh, there's the captain. He's come out on the bridge wing. He's waving. No, sorry, it's semaphore. And he's sending a signal. Foxtrot, Oscar. Oh, forge your own adventure. Hey, they must be Wave Rover fans. Great. Good job, guys. You can see how at just this little distance, just a little over a nautical mile, they're big, but I'm tiny. And these seas, they've calmed down a bit. They're down to about 2 meters now. We're just barely visible. And when these are like 3 meters and I'm down in a trough and it's nighttime and my side lights must be pretty much invisible. And the only thing they can see if they're looking for it would be my sail. There we go. Can't see their bridge for a moment there. Well, it turns out that Wave Rover is just moving a little too fast. When the initial predictions of when the cold front would pass over me were made, they were made on a much slower speed, but we've been averaging 5 to 6 knots for the last pretty much 36 hours. So on account of that, I'm being penalized. The cold front is going to stay over top of me for another 5 hours. That's the alarm going off. That's Mrs. Rover calling me, and she's giving me an update. I'm pretty sure on the rhododendron that she's just planted. It's pretty interesting stuff, and I'm looking forward to reading it after. But anyway, I'm running out of space to hang up all the wet clothes that I have. So I'm looking forward to a little bit of drier weather, and we're supposed to get some tomorrow morning, but this video will be over well before that happens. So next week you'll have to tune in and find out what sunny weather looks like on Wave Rover. As always, thanks for watching and forge your own adventure.